Chrono Odyssey is not escaping the allegations that it is effectively New World from Temu, and to be honest, it's getting a little bit more serious than that. Let's jump in, let's talk about it. So what happened is there was a recent closed beta test for Chrono Odyssey, and in that test you were supposed to stick within one region of the map. At the edge of the maps there was this wall that was initially invisible, but when you get close up to it you realise you can't pass through and it turns blue. But some cunning players found a way through. The way through was basically just to die and make sure your body fell through the other side, log out, and then you would basically spawn at a nearby town that you weren't supposed to be able to get to. I had a very brief moment to do this morning and I never really managed to explore a lot, but some people managed to do it last night and they explored an awful lot more. Now what's the problem here? Everything about this sort of sounds cool. You get a little sneak peek at what's coming. All sounded good, mostly looks good. The issue arises when you go to specific points on the map that have a very similar resemblance to what you might find in New World. And if I'm honest, that is completely understating it. In the game, and I've actually seen two different examples of the same kind of thing, there are some buildings that are incredibly similar, and when I say incredibly similar, I'd say like 99% similar to what you might find in New World when we're talking about the forts. The forts are where the wars would be fought. You can capture them in the open world or you can do the 50v50 wars. And near those forts is also what we called the war camp, just a little tent where you sort of prep to siege the fort. And when I say this is similar, it is very, very spookily similar. Now I would not go so far as to say that they actually copied the models. You can kind of see that there are differences in terms of the 3D models themselves. So it's not literally just copy and pasted and stolen. What they have done is basically systematically replicate the fort, and they've done it very accurately. A lot of the passageways are the same, the stairs are the same, the ways up to the top of the forts are the same. I'd give it a very like 99% close enough kind of vibe if you were trying to do it. Now there are some obvious changes, like it's not exactly the same, but you can very, very clearly tell the inspiration. There is no denying that inspiration. As a New World Andy, anybody who's played New World and done the forts instantly will recognize that. In my opinion, there's no point trying to sugarcoat this. Somebody somewhere has deliberately, intentionally tried to replicate a New World fort. And actually on one of them, if you went to the middle, you can go ahead and buy the territory for your guild, and it had like a cost of like 20,000 gold. And that's effectively the exact same thing that happens in New World. The screen looks the same, the tax information looks the same, everything basically looks the same. Now let's be clear, I do not believe there's any legal ramifications here. The idea of having a fort and the layout and such is not, I don't think, like copyrightable, trademarkable, whichever one it is. Unless Amazon has actually like put in a patent and has the legal rights to that, which I very much doubt they do, then not Nintendo and this isn't Palworld, then nothing is going to come of this like from a legal point of view, I would guess, because I don't think they necessarily have a legal leg to stand on. And nothing seems to have been directly lifted. That just doesn't seem to be the case. Combine that with the fact that the public wasn't supposed to see this, you've had to like sort of cheese your way beyond the barrier and find something you weren't supposed to. I really doubt anything will come of this. Now there's a couple of key points here. Apparently Canon was DM'd on his stream and they've been told that this will not be in any of the future builds, and in fact the build that everybody's talking about, the Jesus patch, it already isn't in that, but it's already been removed before anybody kicked off about it. And you know what, I sort of believe that, and we're going to go with that being true, although technically they could have been like, oh no, we're definitely removing that. But I think here that's probably the case, and I'll get onto why in a moment. Now on some levels there's no denying what has happened. There's no explanation, right? It's just a straight up rip off of New World. However, I'm going to defend it just a little bit, so please bear with me. First, as I said, you weren't supposed to see this. Secondly, I don't necessarily think it's completely crazy when you're starting a game to have an inspiration for that game, and it's quite clear that the inspiration for Chrono Odyssey at some point has been New World. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. The gathering is very similar, and you know, the actual colours of the trees and all that kind of stuff seems to follow a very similar pattern. Everything's sort of similar, right? So I think from a layperson's point of view, what they've probably done is initially they started making New World and they were going to try and improve on New World, which, let's be honest, at this point they've probably not fully succeeded on. And then what they've done is during that they thought, okay, we're going to have the same kind of system that New World is going to have. We're going to have these territories that you can claim, maybe you can fight over. Let's knock something up and let's give it a bash and see if we like it or we don't like it. And during that process they thought, well, we might as well just stick with the plan and make the fort. The forts that we're looking at are the ones from New World. Somebody somewhere has just decided to use that as the template and use that as the one that they were going to go in that version. I don't know if it goes beyond that. I highly doubt that they were going to release it looking that similar to New World. Surely someone along the lines in the testing would have said, hey, don't do this. And if they actually wanted to go ahead with that system, which I don't think they are, by the way, but if they did, I'm pretty sure they would have redone the models. Now, I'm not going to defend whether or not they should or shouldn't have used this as a base to prototype, and I'm not even 100% sure it was a prototype. Maybe they actually were planning on this at some point launching exactly in that state. Personally, don't think it's that crazy to use a different game as a base. We've seen similar games exist in the past, like League of Legends and Dota, TFT and whatever the auto chess game was, Valorant and Counter-Strike and Overwatch and all this kind of stuff, right? There are games that get made that are very similar to other games, and you can quite clearly see the inspiration. Whether or not they've ever crossed this line of having something so similar, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if that's a common thing that happens in gaming, where they just utilize somebody else's like inspiration and then we'll change it later. For me, a bigger question is, at some point, someone along the lines at that studio thought that they were going to have this system. They were literally going to take some of New World's worst parts and try and put them in their game. And only now does it seem like they've decided, actually, let's not have that system at all. Now, why am I so confident it's not in the game? One, canon apparently was DM'd that it's been removed. And two, it's quite clear from all the communications, all the videos, that 17-minute video that they did, when they're talking about content, they're not having mass PvP, they're not mentioning this system, so it obviously, to me, doesn't seem to exist anymore. And it probably hasn't been planned for some time. Everybody's just going to look at this and go, ooh, yikes, that's a yikers right there. It is pretty much almost a direct rip-off. It's not literally copy and paste the models, so I don't think there's any like legal ramifications there, but it's as close to it as you could possibly do without doing that. The layout is pretty much identical. If you're a New World Andy, it's so spooky. On my stream today, I literally went into New World, went into the same places and like alt-tab between the two, and it's crazy how close it is. I think on some level, there's like an ethical question whether or not they should have used that as the base. I don't know why they couldn't have just made their own fort. If I am correct that they just used it to prototype this game mode, then why couldn't they just design it a little bit differently? It wouldn't have been that much work, I don't think. I guess using an existing piece of like modeling probably a little bit easier in the design aesthetic, but I honestly can't see why they couldn't have just bodged together something completely different that looked completely different, so there would never have been any similarity whatsoever. I really can't imagine that taking much longer. A lot of people are going to look at it though and just simply say, well, if the models are like this, is this something that we want to support? Is this something that, you know, further down the line maybe they will add pay to win, because we're seeing some shady behavior? You know, we've got all that M-Pixel thing with the CEO, who's the same CEO of both, but apparently there's no connection. They're promising no pay to win, but Kakao's got a history with adding pay to win, and now they're like ripping off very obvious parts from New World. Yeah, I think that's going to cause a lot of like dubious thoughts in people's heads, considering the fact that the beta also hasn't necessarily been well received. Although I think a lot of the criticism for the beta is a little bit over-egged, like I think it's a little bit over-exaggerated. But there are some very strong things that they need to fix and change and all that kind of stuff. But on this one, I think it's just going to be a yikers. For me, I'm not really too bothered by it, right? Because you weren't supposed to see it. It wasn't supposed to be in the game. Nobody was supposed to know. The outside of that starting zone is obviously not finished. Is it a little bit immoral? Yes. Is it the worst thing I've ever seen in gaming? No. Is it a slight worry that they decided to try and copy New World? Yes, on some levels, absolutely. Although, for me personally, being a New World Andy, if you literally could make New World and you could improve it, then that would be great for me. And maybe that's what they started off with the premise of being. Like, let's make New World. It sold a shed ton of copies, but then instead of like doing all the bad things, we'll just do positive things. And right now, they're kind of failing. Right now, it is basically New World from Temu. But as Bongonbei said, he's hoping that it will feel more like a Tesla. Except unlike Teslas, let's hope it doesn't crash and burn. So for me, I'm not like personally offended by this one. Like, I get why they would possibly do it. I guess it would possibly be prototyped. I guess it would be tested. The first iteration of the game probably was very, very similar to New World, and then they're moving away from that. If it ever made it into the launch of the game, I would feel completely different. I would be like almost borderline angry about it. But a version that they tested that you're not supposed to see that's already been removed, I'm not going to get too worked up about it, but they're definitely not escaping these allegations. It is very, very similar to New World. Let's hope they can make a better version, right? Let's hope they can actually pull it together. Because if they don't, Temu New World is not going to go down well. I'm personally kind of optimistic. Like, I don't think these are necessarily the end of the world. It's a shame that people have seen this. I think if people hadn't managed to get behind the wall, nobody would ever know that they did it. And a bit of me kind of wonders how many other games have done this. We've seen like Marathon and other games where art has snuck through the cracks and they've used things that they shouldn't have done. Maybe this is just a case of that, right? They did it as a test and then they never did it. Or maybe they were actually going to launch it like that. Forget morals, we're just going to absolutely rip it and try and do it better. Maybe that's what they were going to do. There's no real way I can know that intention. We're going to keep note of this one for sure. I think a lot of people are just going to go, lols, it's the same, can't believe it, Temu New World. And then other people are going to say, well, it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's not going to be in the game, so I'm not going to stress too much about it. Let's hope the actual final product of the game is good. And yes, the game does need work. Obviously, Chrono Odyssey needs work. The movement, the animations, the lighting and the graphics all need some serious work. And an FOV zoom slider, please, because like the zoom is making a lot of people sick, in my chat at least. And there's big reasons to criticize it. I think this is just going to get added to the let's pile on the game kind of thing, which isn't necessarily unfair, except maybe it is because you weren't supposed to see it. I don't know. I'm a little bit torn. Let me know your thoughts. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.